Hello and welcome to the latest webinar in our RetailX e-commerce world review series, which is taking place this week. My name is Jonathan Wright and I'm the managing editor at RetailX. This webinar focuses on Switzerland, a country we looked at this year for a new country report and which proved to be absolutely fascinating. Delighted to be joined today by Pat Reed, who is the editor of the report with RetailX, Patrick Wolf, Senior Business Development Manager with Swiss Post, and Thomas Haumüller, E-commerce Product Manager with Asendia. Let's begin by asking each of you to introduce yourself. Pat, perhaps we could come to you first.
Hi, I'm Pat Reed. I was the editor of the Swiss report. My background is I've worked as a writer and editor in music industry and the cinema industry, and now exploring global business and e-commerce.
Great, thank you very much. And Patrick, can you perhaps introduce yourself as well?
Sure. First of all, thanks for having me, giving us the opportunity to provide some value to the RetailX audience. When it comes to my role at Swiss Post, I'm a business development manager, or to be more precise, new business development manager, or as I call it, more an entrepreneurial guy, intrapreneurial guy. So my job is to find, develop, and scale new solutions to the merchants in order to make their life easier to import their goods into Switzerland and to get them back smoothly return-wise. That's it.
Excellent. It sounds fascinating. Thomas, if you could perhaps introduce yourself as well, that'd be great.
Yes, Thomas Haumüller. I'm working at Asendia as a product manager, and one of my strong focus in this role is product marketing, for which one of the key destinations is, of course, Switzerland, the topic of today.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. That's all very clear. Before going any further, I should perhaps just explain a little bit about how the RetailX e-commerce country reports work. The aim is always to offer an overview of a particular territory. We want to give people a general background on what the country's like, what to expect when doing business there. But we also have very much an e-commerce and multi-channel commerce focus on that. So we're dealing with things like what's the consumer like, cross-border commerce, all these kinds of things. And one of the key questions, I think, is what do you need to know to launch in these countries, or if you want to increase your market share in a country where you already have a presence, what do you need to do? What do you need to know? So that's always what's at the back of our minds when we compile these reports. Now, Pat, as the editor, you've pulled out some information which I think we're going to have a quick look over to begin. Perhaps you could begin by telling us a little bit. Actually, in fact, there is the report, which I should have flagged up before, in fact, in all its glory with many, many pages. Pat, perhaps you could just begin by telling us a little bit about the market in general and what we're looking at here. It looks to me, looking at these graphs, that we have a wealthy country, a growing e-commerce market.
Yes, well, our guests know more about Switzerland than I will ever know, and I'm hoping to really draw on their knowledge in this session. But yes, as an outsider's perspective, Switzerland is inescapably a wealthy country. It's associated with affluence. And, you know, we've seen that the data shows that obviously, like everywhere else, it went through shocks and rapid evolutions during the COVID pandemic, and now, you know, we're getting used to a new normal, I suppose, in terms of e-commerce. But it's you know, again, from an outsider's perspective, they do things a little differently in Switzerland. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of country or market. So obviously there's different languages there. There's German, French, Italian, and Romansh. And although, having said that, again, as an outsider, so much of the material that you encounter is in perfect English when you're dealing with Switzerland. that's a good starting point, at least for English speakers. You know, we know that that for example, one thing that Patrick told me was that in Switzerland, the number of hours that somebody has to work before they can afford to buy an iPhone is the smallest number of hours in anywhere. So it's really, you know, there's really that reputation for a high standard of living, high wages, but also high prices. And so perhaps that's why there is increasingly a need for Swiss consumers to look outside their own borders to find value.
Let's have a quick look, actually, another slide, because it does say that the average revenue per user for the online e-commerce market in Switzerland, it's very high, actually, isn't it, and growing.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, as we, you know, we've seen, as in other markets, you know, fashion has been, you know, incredibly lucrative in recent years. And there's this idea that furniture did very well during the pandemic because we were all working from home, so we needed, you know, home office situations to enhance that. But you know, beauty, health, personal household care, you know, everything's really going up. But again, you know, the kind of the cross-border question is very important with Switzerland because there is this, you know, again, it's this situation where prices are lower outside Switzerland, and if Swiss consumers want quality but they want to pay less, they have to look across their borders.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in here with a very short story, but it makes it, I think, yeah, the merchants get a better feeling of what the Swiss market is about. And I don't want to limit it to Switzerland, to be honest. I mean, I represent Switzerland today, and we are talking about Switzerland, but Switzerland represents actually an own category of cross-border e-commerce destinations. I call them niche markets, but they are e-commerce pearls from that perspective. And why is that the case? You know, I'm talking a lot with merchants, and many times I get the feeling when they are talking about Switzerland, for them it's just, we just add a number of potential shoppers, and this number is rather lower. It's only 8.6 million inhabitants, which is also true for other smaller markets like Norway, for example. And they don't actually measure the quality of those shoppers in terms of customer lifetime value. And I always tell them, hey guys, step a little bit back. Think cross-border e-commerce like the ancient spice caravans or routes. Why did they apply? Because they sent ships all over the world because there were goods which were not available in their home country. And there was big potential to make big profits because not everyone was able to bring those goods, pepper, salt, sugar, whatever, to these countries because there were big barriers. They need to overcome thousands of miles of ocean and whatever, you know. And now bring that back on those cross-border e-commerce niche markets, right? I mean, in Switzerland, you have a barrier, you have a custom, and it can become complicated to overcome this barrier. That's the reason why not many merchants have their own warehouse there. They did not set up cross-border e-commerce streams yet, and so on and so forth. Amazon has no warehouse there. Just to give you an example, the biggest platform in Switzerland, which is Galaxus at the moment, I think they have like something around 3 million SKUs. Okay, Amazon Germany has something around 250 million. So when you try to buy something very long tail, very specific, a special pair of sneakers or some special screws for your do-it-yourself work, whatever, it's much like you need to shop it outside of Switzerland. And that's actually the reason why the per capita consumption for cross-border e-commerce in particular is 10 times higher, for example, compared to the German consumer. And that's very attractive from a merchant perspective, because you want to sell into a market where you have low competition, high margins, and a high consumption per capita, because that's actually your customer lifetime value, which then punches way over its weight, referring to the rather lower or smaller population. And I think that is something which needs to be crystal clear into the heads of merchants when they choose destinations in order to extend their business cross-border. And then for sure, data like RetailX, when you provide special data, okay, what's the particular consumption pattern and so forth, helps in order to prioritize the markets you start with.
Thomas, can I bring you in there? And is there anything you would want to add here?
Exactly, Pat, John. I would like to maybe add a few things to Patrick's comment here. As you mentioned, one of the barrier before and still for some retailers is customs clearance. With the Brexit, with the change in the VAT regulations in Europe, many companies had to adapt to provide all the data that they weren't capturing before in their ERP, in their shipping platforms, etc. And all this data that they have now worked on to integrate in their system is now available to them to also pass to the customs brokers in Switzerland to enable a smooth customs clearance process. So where before, as Patrick mentioned, Switzerland was kind of considered as a niche market and there was this barrier of customs, with the work that has been done by many retailers to comply with these different VAT regulations and the customs topic in general, I think there would be more and more retailers ready to sell to Switzerland because of the change the made for this subject. And just coming back to one of the previous points, you mentioned the 4 different languages of Switzerland. I think you have probably a good portion of the population that speaks English, and there's like 3 key languages spoken in Switzerland. The 4th one would represent probably less than, I would say less than 10%. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't mean that every retailers have to adapt their e-commerce website to 4 different languages. But of course, if you want to attract the Swiss customers, it would be best to have your website translated to French, German, and Italian. English would still be an option for sure.
That's absolutely fascinating. One of the things that I wanted to talk about here was this whole problem with, perhaps problem is putting it too strongly, but there is an issue with customs, isn't there? Because Switzerland has a kind of a singular place within the European ecosystem. And perhaps, Patrick, you could just expand on that a little bit and the difficulties that customs can cause and that maybe you guys can help solve.
Yeah, I mean, what I always tell the merchants is, guys, your biggest challenge, or actually they tell me most of the times, their biggest challenge is customs. And I tell them that's true, but at the same time, it's your biggest chance, because when you solve this, you have actually something which protects you against other suppliers who are not so smart to solve this problem in a digitized and automated way. I mean, you need to do some homework on your side, which is basically you have to get your head around product data. The vast majority of merchants, they are ready already because we are talking about product description, product weights, SKU weights. Sometimes we have some issues with HS codes, so customs tariff numbers, which you need in order to perform the customs clearance. But there, when you find the right partner, they can also help you. You'd send them a list with your SKUs and a product description, and they help you to find out the right customs tariff number. And then the second point is interface, API. You need to make sure that you find a partner who offers an API which consumes all the relevant data in order to really automatize this procedure. And what you need to keep in mind here is most merchants have also returns, which is especially true for fashion merchants, right?
I was going to jump in there, actually. I got a statistic, I think, which was that, if you'll forgive me for a moment, 41% of Swiss consumers said they'd returned an item of clothing in our research, the research that we did for the report. The equivalent figure for the UK is 30%. And, you know, British consumers have a reputation as being people who return a lot of stuff, basically.
Yeah, I mean, those statistics are true for some merchants who do a better job with product descriptions, pictures. It's lower. For others, it's higher, for sure. But returns are, I mean, that's not a secret, are the biggest problem economically for the merchants. And this doubles up in cross-border e-commerce when you have a destination like Switzerland without the proper solution in place. Because that's what I want to say is you are actually confronted with 4 clearances. The export clearance for the outbound volume, the import clearance into Switzerland, the export clearance for the returns out of Switzerland, and again, the import clearance into the European Union or the country where you shipped it from, right? And the returns management actually begins customs-wise with the first export clearance for the outbound volumes. Because when you don't have the data in place on article level, the customs clearance data, right? You're not able to perform a clean clearance to get back your duties, which you paid in Switzerland. And you might pay again duties when you re-import the returns because you cannot prove that 3 weeks before you exported them. And this can add up to serious numbers which really crush your P&L. So you need to make sure that you work with a partner who actually orchestrates all 4 clearances in order to have really a smooth processing.
Thomas, have you got anything to add there? I think this seems to mirror some things that we were talking about before the call as well, that were a concern to you.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's really key what Patrick mentioned. It's really in the interest of the retailer to work with one partner who is capable of handling the 4 clearances, just for a matter of having all the right data from the same source. And as I was mentioning before, a lot of retailers now have done their job working on the data structure of the product portfolio in order to access not Switzerland, but maybe the UK or Europe from the UK, or many different countries for that matter to Europe now. So I think this opens the door to the Swiss market to many retailers now.
Excellent. Now, obviously, there are other factors.
Let me maybe add one thing here. You know, when you develop a product, you actually develop kind of a story, right? So as you maybe recognize, I like storytelling. So to make it really short here and to pick up this point, when you have a good product, you have actually here a hero, which is the merchant, and they want to ship their goods into the land of milk and honey. And then we have the bad guy or the witch, which is the custom, the Swiss custom, and also the German custom, UK custom, whatever, for the export clearances. They make it complicated. And now that's what I want to say is you need to have the right sidekick or supporter in order to really make the hero story working out. And just look for a partner who is really capable of doing, or who has the know-how of Switzerland when it comes to customs, and also the digital capabilities to process all for customs clearances. That's one of the main messages, really.
So if the retailer is Batman, he needs a good Robin.
Yeah. To be honest, in my notes, and sometimes I bring exactly this example. That's true, yeah.
I was thinking of Lord of the Rings, actually. I was imagining them putting the team together to go and do the difficult thing, as it were, you know.
Could I just add, when I was thinking about how does a business how does an e-commerce business get their products into Switzerland, I was obviously some of the expertise which we're hearing here, it gives you a good idea, but looking at Swiss Post and Asendia, I was very impressed by the fact that they offer these complete solutions. They will coach a business in how to get started, how to do this, and how to clear all the hurdles, from start to finish. And in terms of returns, they've even sponsored, scientific research into returns. Returns is an exact science, and it's one which they are determined to crack. So I think it's fascinating the level of innovation which is going on here. It really bodes well for merchants, I feel.
Excellent. There's a few other things that we perhaps ought to touch on briefly. We've still got a little bit of time here. One of the things that I wanted to talk about was payment methods, because perhaps you could begin here, Thomas, that payment methods in Switzerland are a little unusual compared to other markets, aren't they? There's a sort of a tradition of invoicing rather than paying by credit card, perhaps, as we might do in the UK or the US.
Exactly, John. There's one point in the payment method where the Swiss shoppers are still quite or very much trusted to pay with invoices, meaning that you could order the goods, receive them with an invoice, and generally have a period of 20 to 30 days to pay the goods you ordered after receiving them. So that's a quite, let's say, unusual method, yes, compared to our neighbors. Also included in there is one of the solutions actually developed by one of the entity of the Swiss Post Group with different banks, which is the smartphone application called Twint, which gives you or gives the website the possibility for you to debit directly your own bank account with this app. So that's also becoming very popular in Switzerland, very used by a lot of shoppers. Invoicing for sure still is a big contender, let's say, in the list of payment methods.
Patrick, are you seeing that Swiss consumers are becoming more like the rest of the world, as it were, or do you think that they will always want to do this kind of bank transfer? What's your experience?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of neutral here because I'm not Swiss. I'm German, but
of course, yeah.
I know, and I know those statistics that this is kind of unusual. But what I really see is I would follow your hypothesis that on the long run, in order to make it more smooth and faster, more and more people, especially the high frequent buyers, they follow these standard approaches like credit card, PayPal, and whatever. So when I would be a merchant and I want to start with Switzerland, that would not be my first priority, because I mean, this is something you can change later on. The first thing I would make sure is to have a good logistics solution in place and to have a good custom solution in place, because when you don't have this one, you might create inconvenient customer journeys, because
Yeah.
you make your customers pay at the front door for duties and taxes because you ship DAP, the Incoterm DAP delivery at place, and not DDP, where everything is already included in the checkout. So make sure that you provide a customer journey which is actually the same from the feeling like buying in Zurich or somewhere else in a shop, right? You only have one checkout, that's it. You pay however you like, or you offer it, and then you get it delivered maybe 1 day or 2 days later compared to a domestic shipment, but the experience overall is the same. And when you do that, by the way, you can also promote this approach already in your ads, in your Google ads, Facebook ads. Hey, we deliver included VAT and included duties. This will already push you, and you can make logistics really a marketing vehicle. So we have no statistics about that, because usually merchants don't share it with us, but we got many feedbacks that their conversion rates and click-through rates in the ads have risen once they promoted actively a DDP logistics approach.
Okay.
Don't compare it with DPD. It's really about the Incoterm, that all duties and everything is included in the delivery.
Understood. Final subject perhaps to go through, I think, which is one that we're going to be talking about a lot next year, is sustainability. Thomas, I know this was an area that was of interest to you. How concerned are Swiss shoppers about issues around sustainability? Our experience doing reports across different regions and around the world is that this is really rising very rapidly up the agenda for consumers, and therefore ought to be for retailers. Is that your experience too?
You know, definitely. I think it's pretty clear that sustainability is the topic of today, and it's going to be a topic for quite a long time, I think. Definitely, when you see what's happening around the world today, it's pretty clear that we have our responsibility here, and that we need to do something, not only as people but as companies. And that's where Asendia, for example, a joint venture between La Poste, French La Poste, and Swiss Post, has decided to offset 100% of its carbon emissions since the beginning of the year. And for example, Swiss Post, the mother company, one of the mother company of Asendia, in its ambitions for the next couple of years, is committed to reduce its own carbon emission from 4.2% per year until 2030. And in order to do so, a lot of the the vehicles that are used to deliver will transition from combustion engine to electric. We already know that some big urban cities like Zurich, which is the biggest city in Switzerland, and Bern, which is, I think, number 5 in terms of the biggest cities in Switzerland, will be fully delivered electrically by the end of the year for, standard parcel and letter distribution. So by 2030, Swiss Post Logistics should be basically producing zero carbon emission for the deliveries, and it has even committed to have a net zero for the entire group by 2040. So ambitious target, but definitely needed, I think, in our world. And yes, a growing concern, not only for the Swiss people, but I think for everybody here.
Does that tally with what you found when you were doing the research, Pat? I just realised I should really have brought you in first to introduce the slide there, seeing as it was you that collated.
Well, you at Asendia were very, being very innovative and in their approach to sustainability is something that the entire company seems very committed to. So I feel that the data, seems to suggest that that there is a growing conscience among consumers in Switzerland. I think they're famously seen as very pragmatic. They want the things that they want, and they want them to be high quality and convenient. But there's also that growing sense of conscience, yes, where increasingly sustainability is going to be moving to the top of the list of requirements.
And it's interesting, Patrick, that you talked about logistics almost as part of the consumer experience and a point of differentiation. And I'm wondering whether sort of fulfillment and sustainability together play in there, as it were. Have you any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean, Swiss people are outdoor people. You see it every weekend when you go by train yourself into the mountains. The trains are absolutely full by families who love to enjoy the nature. So what I want to say by that is I think Swiss people have a very good relation and sensitivity when it comes to their environment. And all these studies actually reflect that relating to logistics in e-commerce. More and more people want a sustainable delivery solution. They are willing to pay additionally as well. And that's what we try to incorporate into our products. So corporate strategy is one thing, and I think it's important to have this top down. But for us, from a business development side, this is really a column we always have when we look at new products. We want to consider sustainability right from the beginning. And yeah, we also tell the merchants, guys, this is also a conversion aspect. I mean, when you tell your Swiss customers your, I don't know, your new outdoor tent gets delivered and everything is offset and carbon neutral, this will increase the likelihood for a conversion, and that's the language what the merchants want to hear. And we get more and more approached by merchants proactively. Hey guys, what is your sustainability background here? So it's definitely in the entire industry, I think, a super important thing. And I hope it continues. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Patrick. Well, I think that's we're up to half an hour there, so I think we're coming to an end. Just to reiterate that obviously you can download the copy of the report, Switzerland 2002 e-commerce country report. There's a QR code there for those of you that are younger and understand how to use them. Thanks, which I'm sure is actually most of us these days, but it's obligatory to make a joke about me being the old guy. I'd like to thank Patrick and Thomas. It's been a fascinating conversation. The one thing that I've taken out of it is that it's a very singular, unusual market, and yet a very European, and yet a typical European market in other ways as well. It's quite a sort of fascinating place, and the information on the customs and things like that I found particularly particularly interesting. As ever, we would love to hear from you. What your insights are here, what your questions might be, and it just leaves me again to say thanks, Pat, thanks, Patrick, and thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Appreciate.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you, John. Thank you, Patrick, as well.
Thanks, guys. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.